And then, since you shared, I was just thinking of one thing for anybody that's listening. If you feel yourself getting in that funk and you're like, have all this doubt of like, am I on the right track? Am I doing things? I always get into the mode of who can I serve today? Because I feel like it's when we get into that like spiraling of all the things, it's very like either ego driven or really self-centered of like, oh, I'm supposed to have this many downloads by this point, or I'm supposed to have this many subscribers. So we're kind of beating ourselves up. Like we're using ourselves as a punching bag. My next question is actually, and maybe we've touched on it a little bit here, but it's kind of a two-part question of like, what's the hardest part of content creation for you? And what's the most rewarding thing about creating content?
Ooh, that's a really great question. Two-part question. Really great questions. Let me answer the second one first. Can you say those again? What was the first one? I mixed them up.
So the hardest part of content creation, and then the most rewarding.
Okay. I'll do them in order. The hardest part has always been outsourcing for me. I've never particularly been a great manager of people. I didn't have a whole lot of experience with that in corporate, and I love people. I love my coworkers, and I've hired on several people at Do You Even Blog, mostly like in part-time or virtual assistant work and stuff like that. I've never been really good at outsourcing. I like my control over my content and my writing. I'm very particular. I don't call myself a perfectionist, and Lord knows when I create content, it's definitely not perfect, and I'm totally aware of it, and I'm cool with it. But for whatever reason, whenever anybody sends me anything else, I'm just like, that's not me. Even if it's like, better than what I would have created, and it often is, I'm just like, I like me better. I've had a hard time outsourcing content, both in editing and creation. Creating blog posts, editing podcasts. I do all my own podcast editing. YouTube editing, same thing. Like I've had YouTube editors and I'm just never super happy with it. That's my hard thing. And we can come back and talk about that if you want to. The most rewarding part for me is hitting publish. And not only that, but I discovered something about 2 years ago. And I was part of a mastermind group. I brought this idea up. I was like, can we all tell each other what we're really good at? Like sometimes it's hard for me to know, like what are my strengths and weaknesses? Like I'm in the weeds, like I'm in the mud, like I can't actually see myself. You guys help me out here. Tell me what I'm good at, what I need to do more of, what I need to lean into, and then maybe some things that I could do less of, that I could outsource or that sort of stuff. And long story short, we had this discussion in our mastermind group, and one of my skills is actually the content creation process, like podcasts, blog, YouTube, snail mail, funnels, email marketing. Like I create. I'm a creator. I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't consider myself an entrepreneur anymore. I consider myself a creator. And what I discovered, and this is where I'm morphing your question, is nothing makes me feel more productive than publishing content. I can answer 1 billion emails. I don't feel productive. I could do lots of analytics and optimizations, which I probably should do more of with my products and funnels. I'd probably make more money. It doesn't make me feel productive. I could do that all day long. It doesn't make me feel productive. One of the only things that really moves that needle is hitting publish, or scheduling content out, finishing content. And I learned that about myself, and that's actually been helpful. It's been helpful for, you mentioned optimizing for fun, or you didn't call it that, but I call it fun optimization, fundomization. That's part of it for me. I need to be creating every day. I need to be working on a blog post or a podcast or a YouTube video every single day, because when I don't, I get to like 5 p.m. and I'm like, did I do anything today? I'm like kicking myself. Like, I didn't do anything today. This is ridiculous, which is not actually true, but that's what my brain tells myself. So yeah, the most rewarding part is being done and publishing something in the world, out into the internet sphere, right? That other people can find. That's how I feel most productive. That's what I enjoy doing. And yeah, I've gotten to a point now where I'm okay with that. I mentioned the problem outsourcing, right? I have no need to outsource an editor or content creation at this point, because that's what I like to do. And that's what makes me feel productive.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So Pete, again, like I feel like we're the same person at this point. Like I'm just
Joke's
like,
on you. I'm actually AI from Crystal
my gosh.
right
yeah. we're in the metaverse. He's actually my alter ego. Like, we have met. Oh my gosh, first of all, I want to tell you that your approach to everything you just said is exactly how I feel about it. I edit my own podcast. I edit my own videos. I do all of my copywriting. Like, I do all of these things. But I really feel what you were saying, that it's not so much about the control. I've outsourced these things in the past, and it doesn't feel like me. Like, I had a really good friend of mine. I was launching this low ticket product, and I launched it out into the world, and I had someone help me like write all the sales copy and create everything, do the design. And I was like, it's not converting. It's not selling. And I had my friend go look at it, and she was like, this is not you. This is like all these stock images and the fonts and the colors. Like, it looks fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but it's not, I don't feel you in this thing. So I think that, in this world of the online, being a content creator, being an online entrepreneur, a lot of the messages are delegate, you need to hire people, you need to do this. Yeah. So it's really refreshing to hear that you're like me. So I'm having this moment of like, oh, I see myself out in the world right now, because I'm the same. I don't like to do a whole bunch of delegation because I love video editing, and I know a lot of people don't, but I love video editing. I love editing my podcast because I feel like the message sinks in deeper. Like, do you feel that you can market your stuff because you have kind of gone through all of the processes?
Yeah. I definitely think early on, especially when I started Do Even Blog, by the way, I mentioned like 50 plus blogs, side hustles, online businesses in those like 6 or 7 years. None of those, 0 of those, were this meta thing. Blogging about blogging, podcasting about podcasting. You know what I mean? Like online marketing talking about online marketing. None of it was that. It was personal finance. It was parenting. It was bluegrass. It was chalkboards. Don't ask me, for another day. The point is, when Do You Even Blog came around and I started this meta stuff, first of all, it's harder. Second of all, I was like, oh, this is me. This is it. And not only that, but I feel it's almost my obligation or my responsibility to edit my own stuff, to create my own stuff. So I'm in the thick of it, right? How am I going to help other people create if I'm not creating? How am I going to help people figure out podcast gear if I'm not spending entirely too much money on podcasting gear to like review and throw stuff out there and so on and so forth, right? So early on, I definitely thought that was part of my job. Like, I have to be doing the thing that I'm going to be talking about, which I still agree with. It's also interesting. This is a side rant, nothing that you asked, but I wanted to weigh in here. I have a friend, Chelsea, who is probably like the definition of online entrepreneur. And I once heard Seth Godin was on my podcast, and he kind of defined entrepreneur as like somebody who has an idea and then finds all the assets they can in order to execute the idea, right? And my friend Chelsea, I wouldn't call it a personal brand at all. She has a business, and she has writers and copywriters and designers and editors, and she doesn't do any of that stuff. She runs the business. She had the idea. She started it, and her face is still all over it, but like nobody produces content for her that she looks at and says, that's not me. Because no one knows. It's always been other people. It's never been her. I mean, you know what I mean? Whereas for you and me, it sounds like we have been ourselves. And by the way, I'm not saying she's right and we're wrong or vice versa. This is just a different thing, right? Mine is more of a personal brand, quote unquote. There's no other Petes that could come in and sound like Pete. There's no other Crystals that could do the same thing. Chelsea's business is not like that. I think that's part of what differentiates... Is that a word? I'm pretty sure it's a word. That's part of what differentiates creators from entrepreneurs. Again, that's just my opinion. That's just my personal experience there. But I just want to share that.
That's fantastic. But you just glossed over it real fast. You were just like, oh, by the way, I had Seth Godin on my podcast. And I'm like, hang on, come back. And I was waiting. I was like, I hope that he brings this up because he's the godfather of marketing. And holy moly, what was that like? Please tell me. I need all the behind the scenes of what this conversation, like, Were you nervous? Were you sweaty hands? Were you
Yeah.
just like, oh my gosh, like I'm about to, like, how did this happen?